A dinosaur the size of a chicken can change a family tree. Not a monster with giant teeth. Not a skeleton that fills a museum hall. Just a small plant eater from Spain. A few fragile bones. A skull that should not look so advanced. And a gap in dinosaur history nearly 70 million years wide. That is the strange part. In 2026, paleontology feels different. The old image is simple. A person with a brush finds a huge bone. A museum builds a massive skeleton. The public stares at size. But the science is moving somewhere quieter. Researchers are reading microscopic bone tissue. They are mapping footprints across ancient landscapes. They are asking how dinosaurs moved, grew, breathed, grouped, displayed, and survived. The biggest clues are not always the biggest fossils. Sometimes the clue is a thin slice of bone. Sometimes it is a footprint on a cliff. Sometimes it is a horn shaped like a myth. This story follows 3 discoveries. One begins in northern Spain. One stretches across the Italian Alps. One comes from ancient North America. Together, they show a new kind of dinosaur science. Not louder, sharper. Not just bigger, deeper. The first discovery is Foskeia pelendonum. It was not the kind of dinosaur that dominates posters. It was tiny. Its body was roughly comparable to a modern chicken. For a dinosaur, that sounds almost impossible. We are used to thinking of dinosaurs as heavy shadows. But Foskeia lived at the opposite scale. Small body, quick movement, a life close to the ground. Its fossils come from the Burgos region of northern Spain. More precisely, from early Cretaceous rocks. These rocks preserve a world more than 100 million years old. That world was not empty. It was crowded with plants, insects, predators, and hidden danger. A small herbivore had to survive inside that pressure. That changes how we imagine it. Foskeia was not simply cute. It was a survival design. It belonged to a group of plant-eating dinosaurs called ornithopods. Ornithopods were successful for a long time. Some later forms became large and powerful. But Foskeia sits near a more delicate part of the story. It is connected to rhabdodontomorphs. That name may sound technical, but the idea is simple. This group helps researchers understand European herbivorous dinosaurs. And for a long stretch of time, the record was frustrating. There were pieces. There were clues. But the evolutionary path was not clear. Then Foskeia appeared. A small animal entered a big gap. This is why size matters here. In paleontology, small animals are often harder to find. Their bones are thinner. Their skeletons break more easily. Their remains are easier to miss. A giant femur can shout from the rock. A tiny jaw whispers. For years, science heard the louder fossils first. That created a bias. The past looked bigger than it really was. Foskeia reminds us that ecosystems were full of small bodies too. Those bodies mattered. They shaped food webs. They escaped predators. They adapted to local habitats. They carried evolutionary information. The mystery gets stronger inside the bone. Scientists can study fossil bone under a microscope. This is called histology. Think of it like reading a tree ring. Not exactly the same, but close enough to understand. Bone tissue can record growth. It can show whether an animal was growing quickly. It can reveal whether a specimen was young or mature. That matters for Foskeia. A tiny dinosaur could be a baby. That would be the easy explanation. But the bone evidence makes the story more interesting. The small size was not simply childhood. Researchers found signs that these animals could remain extremely small. That means Foskeia was not just a big dinosaur waiting to happen. It was a small dinosaur as a strategy. That small choice mattered. In a dense forest, a tiny body can be useful. It can move through narrow spaces. It can hide under vegetation. It can change direction quickly. It can survive where bulk becomes a problem. The body becomes an answer to the environment. Foskeia also shows evidence of posture changes during growth. This is one of the most fascinating ideas. A dinosaur did not need to move the same way all its life. As its body changed, its movement could change too. Young individuals may have relied on one balance. Older individuals may have shifted posture. That is not just anatomy. That is behavior hidden in bone. Imagine a small herbivore pushing through ancient undergrowth. Its head stays low. Its eyes scan for motion. Its legs are built for quick bursts. It is not trying to overpower the world. It is trying to outmaneuver it. This is where the story becomes bigger than one species. Foskeia helps fill a long evolutionary silence. Not because it is huge, Because it sits in the right place. Its skull and body give researchers new characters to compare. Each detail becomes a data point. Teeth, jaw shape, limb proportions, growth patterns, posture. Together, they help rebuild a missing branch. That is how modern dinosaur science often works. Not one dramatic bone. Many small details. A family tree is not repaired with one headline. It is repaired with careful comparisons. Foskeia tells us something important. Evolution does not only experiment upward. It also experiments downward. Smaller, faster, lighter, more hidden. A tiny dinosaur can be just as radical as a giant one. That is the first lesson. Now, the second discovery moves from bones to footprints, and the setting changes completely. From northern Spain to the Italian Alps. Today, the Alps feel like stone snow and altitude. They feel permanent. But deep time breaks that illusion. Around 210 million years ago, parts of this region were very different. The land was lower. The environment was warmer. Soft mud could hold the steps of living animals. Then the mud hardened. The layers shifted. Mountains rose, and the ancient ground turned into steep rock walls. That is the twist. What was once a walking surface became a cliff. In Stelvio National Park, near areas connected with the 2026 Winter Olympics, thousands of dinosaur footprints were found. The number is extraordinary. Reports described about 20,000 tracks. That is not one footprint. That is movement across a landscape. A crowded record of ancient bodies passing through. The discovery began in an almost cinematic way. A nature photographer noticed the tracks. Not in a museum drawer. Not during a planned dig. On remote mountain rock. The site was difficult to access. The tracks were preserved across steep dolomite walls. Some were high above comfortable human reach. So researchers had to treat the cliff like a giant fossil page. Drones became part of the toolkit. Remote imaging became part of the excavation. The brush and shovel did not disappear, but they were joined by cameras mapping and digital models. This is the new fieldwork. A footprint fossil is called a trace fossil. It is different from a bone. A bone tells us anatomy. A footprint tells us action. It captures a moment when an animal was alive. A foot pressed into mud. Weight shifted. Toes spread. The next step landed nearby. Then time did the rest. That makes footprints emotionally powerful. They are not the animal. They are the animal passing by. Bones can feel like remains. Tracks feel like presence. At the Italian site, the footprints are valuable because of scale. Many tracks can show direction. Repeated spacing can suggest walking speed. Parallel paths can suggest group movement. Different sizes can suggest different individuals. Patterns can hint at herding behavior. Scientists must be careful. A footprint does not explain everything. It does not tell a complete story by itself. But a large trackway can become a map of behavior. That is why this discovery matters. The rocks do not just say dinosaurs existed there. They say dinosaurs moved there. The likely track makers were long-necked herbivores from the Triassic world. Some may have been large animals, not yet the famous giants of the later Jurassic, but already part of the long experiment in herbivorous dinosaur life. Their feet crossed mud near ancient coastal environments. Their steps became geometry. Then geology lifted that geometry into the sky. Today people look at a mountain wall, but science sees a vanished floor. That is the quiet magic. The Olympic connection makes the timing memorable. Modern athletes prepare to test speed on snow. Nearby ancient animals left speed and movement in stone. Two very different worlds meet in one region. But the real importance is not the headline. It is the data. The site can help researchers study migration routes. It can show how animals use the landscape. It can reveal whether individuals moved calmly or urgently. It can help reconstruct ancient shorelines and seasonal paths. It can also show how many animals share the same corridor. That word matters. Corridor. Animals rarely move randomly. They follow water. They follow food. They avoid danger. They use terrain. A track site can reveal those invisible choices. It turns a landscape into a behavioral document. This is where footprints become more than marks. They become evidence of ecology. Ecology means relationships. Animals to plants. Animals to mud. Animals to climate. Animals to each other. A skeleton is one body. A trackway can be a community in motion. That is the second lesson. The past was not frozen. It was moving. Now, the third discovery brings us to a very different kind of fossil. A skull with weapons. A face built like a warning sign. A horned dinosaur named Lokiceratops rangiformis. The name means Loki's horned face. And once you see why, the name is hard to forget. Lokiceratops lived about 78 million years ago. Its fossils come from what is now Montana. During the late Cretaceous, that region was part of Laramidia. Laramidia was the western landmass of North America. A great inland sea divided the continent. On that western strip, horned dinosaurs diversified in spectacular ways. Lokiceratops belonged to the ceratopsian family. These were beaked plant eaters. Some had frills. Some had horns. Some had both in strange arrangements. Triceratops is the celebrity. But it was not the only design. Lokiceratops shows how wild this family could become. Its skull carried huge blade-like horns on the back of its frill. These structures curved and projected dramatically. They reminded researchers of the blade imagery linked with Loki. Loki is the trickster figure from Norse mythology. Modern audiences may also think of the Marvel version. Either way, the visual connection is obvious. This was not an ordinary crown. It was a statement. But what was it for? That is the difficult question. People often assume horns are weapons. Sometimes they are. A horn can help in defense. It can push back predators. It can clash with rivals. But ornament can also do something else. It can communicate. It can signal maturity. It can help attract mates. It can identify species. It can show status inside a group. In living animals, display structures are everywhere. Antlers, crests, bright feathers, inflated throats, long tails, heavy horns. They are not always practical in a simple survival sense. Sometimes they are costly. And that cost is the message. A big display says I can afford this. That may be part of the Lokiceratops story. Its horns may have helped it stand out. Not just against predators, against other horned dinosaurs. This is especially interesting because multiple ceratopsian species lived in the same broad region. That challenges a simple picture. We might imagine one ecosystem with one horned dinosaur role. But the fossil record suggests richer variety. Several related species could live near each other. Each one had its own face, its own display, its own evolutionary solution. That is not clutter. That is diversification. The skull becomes a social billboard. A species can evolve dramatic shapes when recognition matters. If animals need to identify their own kind, face shape becomes important. If rivals compete visually, ornaments can grow extreme. If mates choose impressive displays, evolution can amplify the strange. This does not mean we know the exact behavior. We do not. No one watched Lokiceratops walk. No camera filmed a courtship display. The honest answer is uncertainty. But uncertainty is not weakness. It is the place where science works. Researchers compare skull shape. They compare related species. They examine muscle attachments. They study living analogies. They test which explanations fit best. The horn is not just decoration for our imagination. It is a biological structure with evolutionary pressure behind it. That pressure could include defense. It could include display. It could include species recognition. Most likely, the answer was not only one thing. Nature often reuses structures. A horn can warn, impress, and identify at the same time. That is the third lesson. Evolution does not create simple museum labels. It creates living signals. Now step back from all three discoveries. A tiny dinosaur in Spain. A mountain wall of tracks in Italy. A horned giant from North America. At first, they seem unrelated. Different sizes. Different places. Different ages. Different fossil types. But they all point in the same direction. Paleontology is no longer only asking what dinosaurs looked like. It is asking how they lived. Foskeia tells us about growth posture and hidden small body evolution. The Italian footprints tell us about movement grouping and landscape use. Lokiceratops tells us about display identity and ecological diversity. One is bone tissue. One is behavior in mud. One is a skull shaped by social pressure. Together, they turn dinosaurs from statues into animals. That is a shift. The most exciting question is not always how big was it. Sometimes the better question is, what problem was it solving? For Foskeia, the problem may have been survival in dense habitats. For the Italian track makers, the problem was movement through ancient terrain. For Lokiceratops, the problem may have been communication in a crowded world. Each answer is partial. Each fossil is incomplete. But the pattern is clear. Dinosaurs were not one thing. They were not just monsters. They were not just giants. They were ecosystems of body plans, behaviors, signals, and strategies. They lived through changing climates. They adapted to local environments. They moved through forests, coasts, mudflats, and floodplains. They grew. They aged. They competed. They displayed. They traveled. They left traces in places nobody expected. And sometimes the smallest fossil changes the biggest picture. That is why 2026 feels important. Not because every discovery is bigger than the last. Because the questions are becoming better. Scientists are looking closer. They are reading thinner evidence. They are combining fieldwork with digital tools. They are treating footprints as motion records. They are treating bone tissue as growth history. They are treating horns as signals, not just weapons. This makes dinosaur research more human in one sense. We understand animals better when we stop reducing them to size. A creature is not only its skeleton, it is also its habits, its habitat, its movement, its risks, its social world, its place in a changing planet. That is what these discoveries reveal. A chicken-sized herbivore can repair a missing branch. A cliff in Italy can become a prehistoric highway. A horned face from Montana can expose an explosion of visual evolution. The past is not silent. It is just difficult to read. And every year the reading gets sharper. If one discovery from this story stayed with you, remember this. The fossil record is not only made of bones. It is made of clues. Some are massive. Some are microscopic. Some are pressed into stone. Some curve from a skull like a mythological blade. Each clue asks the same question. Can we see the animal behind the fossil? Not the monster. Not the movie creature. The living animal. The one that breathed, moved, grew, adapted, and vanished. That is where the wonder is. So, which discovery feels most surprising? The tiny Foskeia rewriting a 70 million year gap. The Italian footprints turning a mountain into a migration map. Or Lokiceratops wearing evolution like a crown. Leave your answer in the comments. And subscribe for more grounded cinematic stories from Deep Time.